This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, your solution when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Use the code MacVoices2019 to take $20 off your first purchase at linode.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. And folks, this is one of our holiday gifts. No, it's not. No. But this is the only time that we get to talk to Bart Busschots is on when we're both on lockdown. We're going to have to change that in the future. But Bart, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. I guess it's Christmas in April.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that.
No, it's far from Christmas.
Well, but it seems like you and I have such a hard time lining up our schedules. And, I'm just delighted that now I've got a little more flexibility on my side. You're locked down at home like I am on your side. And so we can put it together and have a quick discussion on things.
Yeah, no, it's great. The time zone difference melts away in these weird times.
Yeah, that's a really interesting statement. Not only does the time zone, but the days of the week sort of just flow together.
Oh, that's the problem with working from home, right? I'm not doing work, but my bum is in the same chair. It's very disconcerting. I've actually started dressing for work, even though work is, this is where I work, and you can see in the background my not made up bed, right? So my commute has shortened substantially.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And we should, since we're trying to explain to folks, we should mention I'm in Pennsylvania, you're in Ireland. So,
yes.
That's why the schedule's
a very similar experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm making the point that, so I'm now dressed in t-shirt because it's now weekend, because we have a 4-day holiday weekend because of Easter. But on a work day, I would dress as if I were going into the office, and I would go down and make my breakfast and then come back up in my work clothes. And we have a sort of an unspoken rule in the house that while I'm in work clothes, pretend I'm not here. Don't distract me with minutiae about a cartoon you just saw or a funny tweet you just retweeted or whatever. I'm in work. And then at 5 o'clock, I take my shirt off. Like I change into t-shirt and baggy clothes, and then I'm home. I mean, I don't quite go, honey, I'm home, but I'm not a million miles off.
Yeah. Bart, this has been sort of an unexpected thing because inevitably we're all talking about how we're living our lives here. And the different ways people approach working from home and how they're managing their lives, and whether you live alone or whether you live with someone, whether you have kids, it ends up being just a really interesting combination. And I hope people are taking some of the ideas that everyone is sharing and applying them to their situation, whatever that situation is.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate. So I grew up in a household where for the second half of my childhood, my father worked from home. And he was able to give me a lot of wisdom that I took to heart, like the concept of just because it's in the same physical place, you need to have a separation between work and not work so that you don't end up running the two together. And so while I only have one desk, but it's an L-shaped desk, which is great. So there's this leg of the L has my personal iMac, and the other leg of the L has my work laptop and an external monitor. And so when I'm working, I'm this way. And when I'm not working, I'm this way. And I really am religious. The work laptop has nothing personal on it. No Telegram, no Messenger. There is nothing on it. And there's nothing work-related touches this iMac. And so at 5 o'clock, the lid goes down on the laptop and the iMac comes on.
Bart, that's the first time that anyone has shared that tip, is get an L-shaped desk so you can have two different workspaces. That's great.
It doesn't have to be an L-shaped desk, right? Just a different, even if it's the world's smallest office, technically it's a 1 square meter office. Right. So what? It's office space, personal space.
Okay. I like it. Well, we don't get together often. So there are a lot of things I'd like to touch on with you. I thought, first of all, I know we want to get into security, and I have an idea that'll be the longer part of the show. But I wanted to
put that forever.
Yeah. But I wanted to get your thoughts on maybe some of the more geeky or technical things that folks could be doing during this lockdown, under the theory that you've got a little more time at home. And so whether it's with yourself or for the kids, to try to get them a little more. I mean, I don't expect any 6-year-old to learn coding during this, but at the same time, maybe there's some things that are a little more under the hood than normal. And I figured you're the perfect guy to talk about something like that.
I mean, obviously there's the obvious things to do. So if there's something you've been missing, right? Let's say that you've always said to yourself, I wish I could make graphics, or I wish I could do whatever. The amount of websites that have made their courses available for free for the month of April is huge. So even if you don't want to spend anything, there are lots of sites out there with free videos and stuff. I think Adobe are giving out free their suite for a month even to students, which is astonishing. So no matter what it is, I think there's a lot of opportunities to just spend some time getting some software that you wouldn't normally get for free, and getting some lessons and stuff you wouldn't normally get for free. So I know there's a lot of stuff out there. So I guess whatever your itch is, you can probably scratch it. But I guess if I pimp my own stuff for a bit, there are two long-running series that myself and Allison Sheridan recorded together. One of them is ongoing, and one of them is sort of on semi-hiatus. It's not finished because it'll never be finished, but it hasn't been updated in a while. And we intentionally recorded them as evergreen. We didn't want to make them in any particular time, so they all work just fine now. So the first one I definitely think I want to mention as the most likely to be useful is Taming the Terminal. So our Macs are full-blown Unix machines. They have an amazing, wonderful UI on top of them. But underneath them, the reason they're so stable, the reason they're so powerful is because they're a fully fledged Unix. And once you open up that terminal app, you are down there in a full Linux/Unix prompt. And you can do anything in there you can do on a Linux or whatever. So if you ever wanted to get into looking after servers and stuff, you don't need another computer. Your Mac has it all. And a lot of things are actually, the command line can be a more powerful way of expressing stuff than pointing and clicking. And if you want to automate stuff, well, you're generally just stringing together a bunch of terminal commands. A so-called shell script is nothing more than a bunch of terminal commands in a file that the computer runs for you, one after the other after the other. So if you get comfortable down there, the computer just opens up to you. And you really get a sense of being in control of the darn thing. Right? You're telling it what to do, and it's listening. It's actually doing what you tell it, and it's extremely empowering when you can take that level of control. And so the series is designed to take you from, I don't know what this white box with that black flashy thing is, to the point where you will be comfortable navigating your way on that terminal. And when you have that skill, then something amazing happens, because the Mac's really powerful GUI is actually designed to be scriptable. So if you go into Automator, there's a block in there called execute shell script. And so you can merge your terminal knowledge with the GUI. So you can create little actions that if you right click on any image in the Finder, you can make that do something to the image or whatever, resize the image, copy to the folder, whatever it is you need to do, upload it to your server. I mean, whatever your itch is, you can help scratch it. And Automator is kind of cool anyway, but Automator plus the ability to script, that takes Automator to a whole new level. And so you can just end up combining in this wonderfully Mac-only way the best of the GUI with the best of the command line all merged into one. And I just find that immensely good skill to have.
Bart, the one big, I think the scariest thing about the terminal, because I've learned some from you, and I've learned some from some other places, but the scariest thing in the terminal I think is I can make a mistake there and I can do some damage. I mean,
that is true-ish.
Yeah, I mean, true-ish. Now that's an interesting statement.
Now, the ish is important, right? So
yeah,
it is definitely the case that particularly on a modern Mac, the Mac has made it impossible to shoot yourself in the foot in the biggest possible ways. So you have things like system integrity protection means that even the root user, which is in theory super user, even the root user can't overwrite system files. So the days when you could, in the terminal, accidentally destroy your OS, those days are gone, which is a good thing, because in my youth, I always tell this story because it's important to understand that every single nerd you have ever met has one of these war stories. We have all done this. I'm going to tell you two stories so that whenever you make a mistake, you won't feel bad. So the first one is one where I destroyed my own Mac. So I was doing a bit of shell scripting, and I put a star in the wrong place, and I accidentally typed the command to recursively delete everything in /, which is the root of my computer, which meant it started at / applications and started deleting everything. And very quickly, my Mac completely crashed and was unbootable because Finder was gone. I had deleted /applications /Finder. Now, you can't do that today. That is impossible today because even the root user doesn't have the power to delete system files. So you can't blow up your OS. The other one I did once, because I feel it's important to say you can blow up more than your own computer and you're silly. In work, I managed to destroy our entire Active Directory domain once by accidentally having a wildcard in the wrong place, and I deleted all users, not all users beginning with a certain prefix. We tested our backups. They were not found wanting, so we had everything restored 15 minutes later. But I learned a valuable lesson. Type once, read 3 times, hit enter once. The measure twice, cut once rule is different in computers, but it's the same. So I guess the reason I'm saying that is twofold, right? Everyone makes mistakes. If you make a mistake, don't feel like, oh my God, I'm terrible. No. We've all done silly things. It's fine. But it's much safer now than it used to be, right? So you can't destroy the system. However, and this is the ish, right? So I, as the user logged into my Mac, have the ability to create and delete my files. I, running a command on the terminal, have the same powers as I have clicking a mouse. So while I can't destroy the system either way, I can destroy my files. And you know what I care about more than anything else in the world? My files. So 99% of what we do in Taming the Terminal is non-destructive. The only time we come into something with the ability to destroy things is the delete command, which is rm. And that episode, that installment, is full of warnings. This is the dangerous bit. This is not the dangerous bit. So almost all of Taming the Terminal is safe. And whenever it's not subtle. We landmark it really clearly. Beware of this. So unless we tell you auga, you're fine. What you're doing is you're looking at stuff. You might be creating things, and I guess you could create too much. But control a Command A and the Finder and a backspace key, and that's taken care of. But we try not to lead people astray. We try not to lead people into danger, and if we do, it's signposted.
Okay, so what I took out of all that is, number one, back up one more time. Back up. Because I mean, especially if you're going to start to try to learn this stuff. But even any otherwise, things can go wrong.
I would say don't think that learning Taming the Terminal is a reason to start backing up. You should start backing up because you should start backing up. Like I say, with the exception of the time we covered the delete command, you are not in any danger in Taming the Terminal. And when we covered the delete command, we start by saying, this command deletes things. That is dangerous.
Right. And the terminal is not like the GUI. There is no undo in terminal.
That is correct.
Yes.
That is correct. Now, most terminal commands, it wouldn't make sense, right? If you're asking it to list me all the processes, well, there's nothing to undo, right? Most of the stuff you're doing, a lot of the stuff you're doing in there is informational or creating things. And the undo of create is, I guess, delete. But if you delete something in the Finder, it goes into the trash can. If you delete something on the terminal, you have just sent it into oblivion. It is gone. And that is so that like I said, that one command, rm, which stands for remove, it does what it says.
And very effectively too.
And extremely effectively, yes. Yeah. So with that one tiny caveat, don't be afraid of the terminal. Don't be afraid of the stuff we do in Taming the Terminal. We are very careful to make it a safe place to play. And when we do venture into that, because the ability to mass delete is actually often very powerful, because a lot of the times when you need the power of the terminal, it's because something's gone wrong and you have 5,000 of something to get rid of. And that takes forever in a GUI, but can be done in an instant in the terminal. And that makes the terminal brilliant and scary all at once.
MacVoices is supported by Linode. You can build it on Linode. A robust online presence is important anytime, but even more so right now. You need your website or your hosted services to be as stable and secure as possible, but you also need to have those services as responsive as possible. And that's why you need Linode. If you already have a site, take a look at how long it takes to load. If it seems slow, you should look into Linode. Their native SSD storage, 40 gigabit network, and industry-leading processors make sure that your site will load as quickly as possible. And a fast-loading site means more business. If you're looking to build a new site or deploy new services, you should look at Linode for the same reason, but also because of their 10 worldwide data centers, so that your site can be hosted where it needs to be, not where the service provider thinks it should be. And you want to be sure that your site is easy to keep up. Linode makes deployment and maintenance easy with their tools to provision, secure, monitor, and back up your server. And that's just the beginning. So right now, go find out what Linode can do for you at linode.com/MacVoices. That's Linode, linode.com/MacVoices, and take $20 off your first server package. Linode.com/MacVoices to take $20 off your first server package. Get started now and have your new server up and online in no time. Thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices. Bart, can you give us some examples of things that you can do in the terminal that you that you can't do in the GUI? And you just gave one example, but that to me that's one of those ish things.
I'll give you a practical example. So in the last month, I have written a bunch of Automator Actions that use terminal commands. And so this is just a random sampling of what I've been doing recently. So the first thing is I wrote a collection of Automator Actions which take the content of the clipboard, process them in some way, and write them back. And specifically, it takes the clipboard and either converts it to all uppercase, all lowercase, or so-called title case. And the convert to lowercase actually need a lot, because you'll often get sent something in weird capitalization and it has to go into a database or something and it needs to be in all lowercase. Or maybe the converse, it's a MAC address and you want it in all uppercase. And so there are simple terminal commands for doing that kind of text manipulation. And with the power of Automator's run shell script action, you basically have an Automator block for get content of clipboard. You feed that into the execute shellcode command where you copy and paste the terminal command. And then you take the output of that block in Automator into the copy to clipboard command. And there you go. There's your Automator action from clipboard through terminal to clipboard. Another recent one, I needed to do a whole bunch of stuff with ISO 8701 dates. So the ISO 8701 is a format for writing out dates. It's basically year. So 4-digit year dash 2-digit month dash 2-digit day, the letter T, hour, colon, minute, colon, second. So it's really nice because it sorts alphabetically. It's a way of writing dates that they sort properly. And it's also a way that a whole bunch of computers and databases all understand the same language, hence ISO, International Standards Organization. But I needed the current time in ISO 8601 I needed about 15, 20 times a day, and I got fed up. So I just wrote a little shell script that spits out the Automator, that spits out the ISO 8601 date, and again combined it with write to clipboard. So now I just hit the key combo for the Automator action, and then my clipboard has the ISO 8701 date for now. And then I just paste it wherever I need it. So they're just two random examples from the last 2 weeks. And generally speaking, if I have an itch to scratch, it's usually scratched by combining the terminal with Automator or something like that.
Okay. We all know that Automator is... I want to say terminal oriented, but that may not be the proper.
It's not quite fair because you can use Automator quite powerfully without ever touching the terminal. Or if you're a JavaScript programmer, you can use the Automator with JavaScript that has an execute JavaScript. Or if you're an AppleScript person, you can use Automator with execute AppleScript. I mean, Automator can mold itself to your skill set.
Okay.
But it is a programming way of thinking, right? You have an input, you do something, and you have an output. Then you have an input, and you do something, and you have an output. And that's what the terminal is. Inputs, something, outputs. And that's what programming is. Inputs, black box, output. So it's the same way of thinking.
And that's a really great basic tip right there, to think of it that way. And I don't think a lot of us think about Automator or programming or terminal that way. We're so afraid. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but
intimidated might be a better word, right? It's an empty white box, and you know it has the ability to do things you probably don't want it to do, and you're not quite sure how to make it do the things you do want it to do, and it's not like a point-and-click interface where you can stumble around and learn, right? You can stare at that box until the cows come home, and no inspiration is going to hit you. You need someone to help you get into it. So it is intimidating for sure.
Yeah. Another thing I want to touch on, we'll get to that in a minute, but you also mentioned the second course, and I want to make sure we keep the courses together, so we talk about those.
So the other one that's still very much ongoing is called Programming by Stealth. And thinking about it, actually, the by stealth bit means it may actually be more approachable in hindsight than Taming the Terminal. So Allison, who I record with, and who you promised you'd mock mercilessly, Chuck, you're slipping here.
I'm waiting for the end, and then I'm saving it.
Oh, there you get out of the way.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So Allison retired, and she said she wanted to program, but she was kind of intimidated by the thing. And I said, no, I know how to do this. And so what we've done is we've snuck up on true programming in really small bite-sized pieces. And we started with HTML, which is not a programming language. It's just a way of describing the structure of a web page. And it's very simple. You know, this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is a link, this is a list. And yes, it involves structure and it involves writing text following rules, but it's not intimidating in the way that a Java program is or whatever. But it does get you thinking in terms of, I need to be exact because the computer is very, very, very stupid. If I leave out an angled bracket, it has no idea what I meant, right? A human being will look at it and go, well, clearly you meant this, but a computer doesn't have intelligence. And so you're doing something that's not really programming. It's not really difficult. It's very visual because you see the result of what you're doing, but it's teaching you to think in that specific, precise way. I must follow these rules or the computer won't understand me. And then we throw in some CSS. And so now we're saying not only what is on this page, but how it should look. So if it's a paragraph, it should be Times New Roman, 12-point font in purple. I don't know, whatever you want. And then that's still not programming. And then we start to sneak in a bit of JavaScript so that this web page comes alive in some way. And so we start to be able to write little web apps. And that's sort of the stage we're at now, where we're writing actually not little web apps. We're writing actually really chunky web apps. So the last challenge I set was a currency converter. And so people submitted in the end a working currency converter that used a free and open source API to get the exchange rates, but presented it in an extremely pretty way and allowed users to add and remove currencies and to change the values being converted. It was a fully functional currency converter, and quite frankly, a lot better than the free ad-supported ones out there on the web. Most of the submissions I've seen were much, much better than what's on the web now. So we've gone slowly from I don't know anything about programming to writing really nice web apps. Granted, it's taken us, I'm currently writing the show notes for installment 94 of X, and we have no idea what number X is going to be, right? But you can start at any point because it doesn't matter that myself and Allison recorded the first few installments 5 or 6 years ago. It's HTML is still HTML. Learning it is still just as valuable. You're still going to get just as much out of it as we did back then.
So that course is just covering HTML, or are you getting into any other languages?
Well, right now we're in some serious JavaScript. Okay. We are seriously writing like serious web apps, and we're about to take a really serious plunge where we're going from client side to server side. We're about to encounter PHP for the first time. We're a few weeks away from making that switch. So we've gone from very trivial little JavaScript programs to full-blown web apps, like really nice, using a whole bunch of libraries, stuff like Bootstrap, to make really pretty-looking, fully functional web apps. But slowly, we snuck up on it by stealth.
Well, and I like the idea of starting with HTML, because HTML, you have the ability to kind of put side by side if you want. Okay, here's the HTML, and here's what it looks like. And here's why it's looking like, what, and you're right, remove that bracket and see what falls apart. And okay, oh, that's where that is, because I know tables, especially in HTML, can be a little
fragile.
Fragile, and take a little getting used to the idea of looking at it in the HTML version versus what you're trying. It's almost like 2D and 3D in my head.
Because rows and columns, they don't quite translate the way you'd expect, because the columns are cells in rows, and there's no actual concept of a column. You just sort of have to count.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great way to start, and I will abuse Allison only because she's Allison, but I think both of these series are absolutely terrific. I know I'd be lying to you if I told you I watched all of them, but I've watched some of them, and each time I do, I come away and A, I've learned something, and B, I think I need to find time to watch more of these because I do learn from them. I learn from you, not Allison, but I learn. So,
no, in fairness to Allison, actually, she plays a vital role because I do this stuff for a living. It's very hard for me to remember what's obvious and what's not obvious. So what I need is someone to play the role of everyman, to stop me, to pull me back and say, no, you cannot skate over that. That is not a subtlety. That is not something obvious. That needs deeper explanation. Back here now and explain it to me properly. And that is so valuable. I mean, without Allison, I think I would have lost everyone by week 2.
Well, you're right. And that happens with any of us with anything. It's easy because now we understand it, and most things are easy once you understand them. But when you're first opening up that white box with a little blinking cursor, it's like, okay, where do I even begin? So, yeah.
And Allison's role is vital in making sure that the series leaves as few people behind as possible.
So I wanted to make sure we got that one because that sort of flows into what's next. And that's something I wanted to ask you about. Why are we seeing, at least here in the U.S., and maybe you're not even aware of this, we're seeing a lot of stories about the government needing COBOL programmers because of the unemployment system and needing to upgrade it. And I know I used COBOL in college, which was, a
common business-oriented language, I believe, is what COBOL is.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, I remember enough of it to be dangerous. I would never, dig in. But and I could tell you stories about my first programming course too, and that was a couple years ago. Just a couple. But what is it about? Why do we see some of these ancient languages just holding on, and why is it so difficult to go back and for a modern programmer, say, to reacquaint themselves in a pretty quick fashion?
Okay, so there's a few things going on there. So I suppose at a practical level, when you have a system that contains a lot of data that's needed every single day, it's extremely hard to re-implement that, right? How do you say to the US government, right, we need a week where we transition from the old system of unemployment to the new. Let's just have no one apply for unemployment for a week or a month. Like, when do you get the opportunity to do that? Or you have a system which is functional, and it would cost you a few billion to replace it. How do you justify that budget? Yes, but it works, doesn't it? And it can be extremely hard to retrofit any tech. So ironically, the places you find the oldest technology is usually banks and governments, because they were early adopters of IT. They adopted at massive scale, and there is no concept of downtime. That is just not acceptable. And so mainframes and stuff, and those old IBM mainframes, they live in banks and governments.
I had not thought about it from that perspective of a start and stop. I'm probably going to get myself in trouble with this, but I know I've had some discussions with educators and trying to compare the education world to the business world. The business world never stops. The education world, at least in our elementary and high school systems, and the universities too, to probably a lesser degree.
There is a cycle to them.
Yeah, they have okay, we have finished with this cycle, and now we're going to take a break, and we start another cycle. And in business, you don't have that.
That is true. But even in education, there are some systems that have the same problem the government and the banking systems have. Replacing a student record system is almost impossible. And what you will find is that the most arcane system in most universities is the student record system, because it was put in first. and it's been upgraded along the way and dragged a little bit into the future. But what you'll mostly find if you scratch even the slightest veneer off is an Oracle app that started as Oracle 2 or something, is now running Oracle 18 or whatever the current version of Oracle is. But it has been constantly dragged forward into the future. And its design, its underlying structures are archaic. It has archaic table names using 3-letter prefixes and postfixes and stuff, because at no point in time was it acceptable to be without a student record system for a day.
Again, great points. So in a situation like that, and I recognize one of the barriers here is costs, but
yes,
why wouldn't you at least try to run a couple systems in parallel for a little while? And in the case of the students, for example, okay, so that 2, 3, 4 years maybe, until the old students wash out of the system and everybody's on the new system. Or is that just
it comes down to
feasible?
Cost, right? So what you have is you would have to run 2 of everything, so you double your costs. And you would have to justify to management, who are very interested in student retention and all sorts of stuff. And they're looking at it going, right, but does our current system allow us to do everything we need to do? Clearly it does. We're operating. Why would we invest, right? Finite budgets, many, many things calling on them. Yeah, some things just don't make it, right? Make do and mend, right? Drag it forward. So it's very, very difficult. And it's easier to get money for a project, right? Where you say, if we spend $4,000 over the next, not 4,000, that's a stupid number, 40,000 is a much more realistic number for anything at all. If we spend that money over 3 months, we can add this feature to our existing system. Yes, it's still the old system, but we've now upgraded this corner of it. And over time, you sort of very slowly crick it up, sort of little by little, to the point where it's not quite what you started with. It has become modern-ish, but it always retains fossils and artifacts and weirdness from its original form because it's never been redone from scratch. You have this technical debt that you're dragging behind you. And governments really are stuck like that because they have a cycle for, depending on whether it's, Congress is every 2 years, right? You guys vote every 2 years. So it's very hard to get the political will to spend a vast wodge of cash on an upgrade that will take 4 years. Right? What's the incentive?
I feel obligated at this point to mention the rewrites that Apple did of Keynote and numbers and pages. Where
they're a perfect illustration of what happens, right?
Yeah, I mean,
your new system is not going to be as good as your old one was,
right?
Initially.
For a while,
yeah, initially, right? So on day one, people are going to hate it, right? Final Cut Pro 10 went over like a lead balloon. Now, it untethered Apple from years of technical debt, and the current Final Cut Pro is an amazing product. And the same is definitely true with iWork, which is much more in your average person's bailiwick. The fact that it's now the same code base on iOS and the Mac means you can seamlessly use handoff to start editing on your iPad and finish editing on your Mac and then take over on your phone and present it from your phone or whatever. But wow, did we pay a price for about a year or two when our desktop apps got stupid. Like, they were fully fledged apps, and then they were iPad apps with a teeny tiny veneer. Now they're great again. But God, that middle period was horrible, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're a university with a student record system that used to be able to do all the bells and whistles, and now the bells and whistles are all gone, you're going to be one very unpopular director of IT.
I think a lot of folks right now, there are a lot of very unpopular directors of IT as companies struggle to have people move home and work, and they want to maintain, and this is sort of my segue into the next section, but they want to maintain productivity, they want to maintain capability, but they want to maintain security. And that is a real challenge right now.
Yes, it is, because if this pandemic had not been so sudden, right? In January, we weren't thinking about this. It was a faraway problem in the depths of China in a place we'd never heard of. I mean, I now know that Wuhan is a spectacularly important transport hub and a major manufacturing center. But the me of December 31st had not a clue. Never heard of Wuhan, no idea. Felt like Timbuktu. Well, things changed pretty darn quick, didn't they?
Yeah.
And so I work in a university. I'm perfectly happy to say that. You Google my name, it's quite unusual. You will know that I work in the Department of IT Services at Maynooth University. That's no big secret. We got lucky because we were put on lockdown one day before our midterms. So Thursday night, we were told, that's it, you're not coming in on Friday. But Monday was the start of midterm. So our staff had a week to switch modes. We had a week to get ready to deliver remote. Now, a week is not a long time, but a week's an awful lot better than the 3 days we would have had if we hadn't had that midterm. So those of us in IT had a very frantic week, but we were able to start teaching online on the first day back after the midterm. I'm sure the students felt it wasn't the world's smoothest transition. I have no doubt. I have no doubt the lecturers felt it was a very stressful transition. But that week bought us time. But if we'd known at Christmas to expect this by mid-March, we would have put a lot more infrastructure in place. We would have put a lot more training in place, and we would have been able to engineer systems with a lot more security out of the box. But it's really hard to open up something where you've been working from on campus for decades to suddenly working remotely, and that campus boundary, that campus firewall has been your edge, has been your protection, and now everyone's on the wrong side of the bloody wall. Right? And you're trying to keep them safe and they're outside the wall. It's a very different way of thinking. And arguably we're lucky that so much is in the cloud these days, because anything that's in the cloud, it doesn't make a difference whether you're on campus or off campus. You had to secure it properly anyway. So we were using Office 365 with two-factor authentication. Well, now we're using Office 365 with two-factor authentication. Phew, that covers off email and stuff. We very coincidentally and luckily switched to using a software as a service model that's cloud hosted for our e-learning system. So our e-learning system was sitting in the cloud and is sitting in the cloud. Phew, we didn't have any problems there. But 5 years ago, 1 year ago, that would have been different. So, but there's still a lot of things. A lot of things like finance systems and stuff are all built around the concept of these people at these computers have these rights based on a firewall somewhere. Now they're on the wrong side of the wall. And so you're trying to figure out, how do we allow these people to make sure payroll runs? We're very well motivated on that one. Because if payroll doesn't run, I don't get paid. So we very much help those guys. But it's a real struggle to reorient yourself and to do so that the lights stay on, the service remains running, and you're not exposing yourself to being on the front page of the Irish Times. Irish University loses control of exam grades, or Irish University leaks everyone's social security numbers, right? You don't want to end up on the front page. And likewise, you don't want to end up with, Irish University fails to deliver a single online lecture due to excess security or something. You don't want to be on the headlines for that reason either. So, it's such a balancing act, and I'm glad I'm not director of IT, because director of IT has to make these trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
And they're getting shouted at from management that we need this to work, and they're getting, if I get this wrong, I'm in deep, deep doo-doo. Very difficult position to be in.
That's the first part of our conversation with Bart Busschots. In part 2, we get into a discussion of privacy, security, Zoom, and what responsibility you have when you click accept and start using some of these services. So I think you will enjoy that conversation. Please stop back and check it out. As always, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.